Reorganisation is the biggest shake-up in local government for 50 years, and it's being driven hard and fast by the Treasury, who want to save money from bailing out financially incompetent councils. As you know, I will say most of them are Labour, but I would say that, wouldn't I? Including Nottingham City and Birmingham. What I'm calling out today is councils right across the county seem to be being forced to pick between 1E or 1B, which would see the City Council expanding by 2 districts. And we see that, despite hearing in the press that you guys will have reported on yourself, is that the City Council are saying they're going to be financially sustainable within 2 years. So why aren't other options yet being considered? Because as we know, any disaggregation of the existing county boundary will cost the taxpayer £8 million more than if the county stayed as it was without losing any districts. And that's £8 million that could be spent and should be spent on council services rather than splitting up councils. And what we see with 1B and 1E that councils across the county are picking from is large chunks of rural Nottinghamshire being absorbed into the city, making it one of the biggest rural cities in the country. And those towns and villages taken over by the city will be ignored as public service demand in places like Sneinton and Lenton will be over-prioritised over villages in the Vale of Belvoir or Arnold and Carlton, for example. And if you're a resident right now in Broxtowe, filling out the consultation that's gone live, you are seeing no option or have been able to take part in that in a way that prevents Broxtowe joining the city. And I think that's disgraceful, because if you live in Broxtowe today and you are receiving adult social care from the county council, you are receiving adult social care from a care provider that is rated good by the CQC. And we'd all like to see that for our friends and family. The day you join the city, which, to be clear, both options on the table at the moment force Broxtowe into the city, the day you join the city, you will then receive care by an authority and a provider that's rated inadequate. And that just is simply unacceptable. 1B and 1E were both drawn up prior to the government's watering down of the criteria, which happened in June. I've given you all the feedback from the government there. The 500,000 target for areas having under unitary authority having to be at 500,000 residents, that target's now been watered down and gone. Districts as building blocks with no boundary changes, gone, and that makes absolutely clear in the pack in front of you. So what we're saying right now and calling out is that we must now see other options drawn up against the watered down criteria. Options that may include Rushcliffe, Gedling and Newark combining, which Rushcliffe have already done some work on, but it's very frustrating that those proposals have so far been blocked by unelected bureaucrats from being worked on even further. And we're told by these unelected officials that, well, the business case wouldn't stack up, and that's why they're refusing to do any more work on it. Well, let's see it, do the work, and let's see that in broad daylight. Other options may include the city expanding in urban areas like Beeston. Again, let's do the business case, let's see that. This petition's been signed by over 20,000 residents, 12,500 of those live in Rushcliffe and nearly 5,000 in Gedling, saying that they don't want to join the city. And as I say, Broxtowe residents today are only seeing two options that both include them going in the city. Any option, to be absolutely clear, of Rushcliffe or Gedling joining the city is not good for the remaining part of the county. Why? Because Rushcliffe has the highest council tax and business rate income. They don't pay the highest council tax, they just have the biggest income for that. And that funds services right across the county, libraries, rural bus services, and keeps council tax low in those areas. If you put Rushcliffe in the city, what will happen? You'll pay more tax. Every resident will pay more tax in the city and the remaining county area and receive less services. And the financial calculations done by PwC, which is public, show that there isn't a huge difference in those council tax incomes between Gedling and Rushcliffe. So either joining the city is not good for the remaining areas. And council tax, you ask anybody in Nottinghamshire what their highest bill is in their household. Council tax is the answer. City residents pay far more than the county. For example, a Band D property in Gedling pays £174 less than a Band D property in the city. While I was the leader of the county council, I only ever put council tax up by 2.84%, which was lower than the maximum. If any resident joins the city, they are potentially facing a 7% council tax increase. 7%. Both for 1B or 1E. So every resident right across Nottinghamshire and Nottingham City will pay more and receive less. And that is why we must now see other options coming forward in line with the latest criteria, not having to be 500,000 residents and not being based on existing district boundaries. Options can now include redrawing the boundaries, so different LGR options could be the city expanding slightly, as I said, into areas such as Arnold or Beeston, or Gedling, Rushcliffe and Newark joining together, which would see most of Broxtowe kept in the county because they'd be in the only other northern council area. And as I say, and I keep repeating, Broxtowe residents right now are not seeing an option that keeps them out of the city, even though there's petitions saying they want to be. We're proposing that can be done. And what needs to happen after today, I'm calling it out that other options should be on the table to meet the new criteria. What politicians now need to do is make clear to officers that we want to see business cases drawn up before November. Our residents deserve a wider choice of options, and the interim plan submitted in March actually had 2 paragraphs in it that said we can look at boundary changes. And as I say, we need to do that for the sake of keeping the tax low in every area and improving services for residents. If done right, unitary authorities is a good thing, and it can result in better local services, slicker decision making and joint up approaches to schools, buses, health, planning, bins, the whole lot, and lower taxes. But it must reflect the area. The government's own watered down criteria says that they need to be flexible so it meets the local area, and we must now see other options drawn up and proposed to the residents of Nottinghamshire so that it is right for them, and we implement a local government structure that isn't rushed like it was 50 years ago and with silly boundaries, but is right for the area. And that's what we're saying today. There are other options that we can draw up against the new criteria. Let's see them, and let's stop the unelected bureaucrats keeping them in their cupboards. Let's see them publicly. Any questions? That's a lot of information.
Can I just add, if I may, government reorganisation took place in 1976. They made such a hash of it. 25 years later, they had to reorganise the city and the county. Cost an absolute fortune. Office blocks, God knows what else, had to come into operation. If this is done badly, we will end up in the same boat as we ended up in last time, and that will cost the residents of Nottinghamshire an absolute fortune. That's the first point. The second point is we are absolutely aware that our residents, the largest bill in their household is their council tax. And the last thing we want to be doing as politicians is allowing bureaucrats to put up their council tax in a disproportionate manner because they are unprepared to look at favourable advantages as far as the LGR process is concerned. And that is the real standpoint why we're here. We're trying to reduce the impact of this on the council taxpayer. Sorry,
Sorry, far away.
There's not very long to go before these deadlines, and what are you expecting to see before then? It's coming up quite fast. That doesn't give anyone a lot of time to put more options on the table, and for the public to have a chance to really consider them.
Yeah, so the time frame that we're all working to is set by the government. We had to have the interim plan submitted in March, which we met. We had feedback on that in June, the 3rd of June, which is in front of you now, and that feedback moved the goalpost. It changed the criteria, but the only options being put forward by councils at the moment are ones against the old criteria. So all councils across the country are facing that time pressure, and we have to do it before November. Interim work, thanks to Rushcliffe, has already been done on the Rushcliffe, Gedling and Newark and Sherwood option. That now needs to be taken to a full business case to be considered by politicians, but more importantly the residents. and that can be done, you know, before November. A lot is possible. We're the only people doing well out of this LGR stuff are big consultants that are earning a lot of money, and we can get them to do the work quick enough so that residents of Nottinghamshire get a option that keeps their council tax low, on the point you made, Bruce, and protects their vital public services. And that's what Nottinghamshire deserves. We need to do it, and we need to do it fast by November.
And that's, you talked about public engagement, so the councils collectively have issued the public engagement statement, so we'll be going out and informing the public to make sure that they are as best informed as possible. So that public engagement is taking place, but your question was about the short timescale, and you're quite right. Because it's such a short timescale, that public engagement process is going to be fairly brief.
Yeah, and sorry, and the point. So I'll continue. The point is that public engagement is flawed, and that's what we're saying today. If you live in Broxtowe, you are taking part in a public engagement that gives you two options: city or city. That's the only two options you're facing, and it's based, the public engagement and all the votes that have been taking place the past 2 weeks at councils are based on options that were drawn up against old criteria. The goalposts have been changed by the government, and therefore the proposals need to change.
And the Secretary of State has eased his requirements as far as the LGR process is concerned. So he's eased that we don't need to hit the 500,000 figure as far as population is concerned. That's the first point. And the second point is he had a stipulation that all changes should be coterminous with the borough and district council boundaries, and he's eased that requirement as well. So it's a last minute change as far as Secretary of State is concerned, which has been drawn out of the fact that other authorities are in exactly the same boat as what we are. Want a better terminology.
If I may as well, there's a point here to say that the Secretary of State has changed the goalposts in a way with his changing of the criteria. So it would be worth pointing out to him that he might want to move that deadline back slightly to allow not just Nottinghamshire but other authorities to have the time to do the work properly. And by moving that back a few months, I think that would probably help everybody.
Is that something you're going to feedback and actually ask for that extension?
Well, we can do, yeah. We can do that. We can do that. And I know, I think it's Kent Council, but don't quote me on that. But one of them that's been taken over by Reform at the last in May have already written to the government to ask for a delay, so that they can take on board their views different to the outgoing administration.
I think the thing that concerned me and was brought to my attention last night is I was at parish council, and they have got information that they can now start to consult with their survey. And I sat there and I thought, but they're not given the proper options. They are given the two old options. So here we are, they've gone away to do their survey, and they have no idea from government that there are other alternatives. And I think that's the problem, because they'll send in their surveys because it's such a short time, and they're going to get a skewed result, because if they had the proper options put before them, they're no doubt their surveys would be completely different from what they're going to do. So the government will say, well, we've had a good support of it, so we're going ahead with it. The fact is, the parish councils and residents are being given the wrong information. And I think that's what the leader's trying to say, really.
I mean, I've heard this spoken about extensively, but why do you think then they're pushing these two options, and for people in Broxtowe they're not even being given another choice? Like, why do you think it is being pushed down a certain way at the moment?
Because when the government issued the invitation in January, I think it was, to leaders, and I was one of those, the criteria was very strict. You must come forward with proposals that meet the 500,000 target and are based on district building blocks. What they meant by that is, if you move, you can't move part of the district in, you can't move Beeston in without moving the whole of Broxtowe into the city. And the reason they did that, which I set out at the start of this, is so that it gives city failing city councils that are bankrupt, Nottingham and Birmingham, it gives them a wide area to build on to generate more taxpayers. That's in simple terms, that's what they've done. Over the course of councils submitting their interim plan by March, the government have heard lots of feedback, and including from this council when I was the leader, saying that isn't what the residents want. The residents want to be able to look at other options that include boundary changes, because why should Nottingham City become, if Rushcliffe moves in with Broxtowe or Gedling, why should it become the biggest rural city council in the country? And why should the residents in Rushcliffe be overshadowed by the demands in Lenton or Sneinton, for example? And we made that point, and as Bruce said, other councils right across the country made that point. And then there was the pre-election period where the government couldn't talk to councils and councils couldn't talk to government. And then in June, when the feedback was issued, all of a sudden the goalposts have moved to match what councils, quite rightly, including me, were saying. And that's why new options are now possible. And those new options are gathering dust in unelected bureaucrats' desks. And that is unacceptable. The residents of Nottinghamshire need to see those options. We need to do the business case. We're very grateful to Rushcliffe for doing a small part of that. We now need to go to full business case on all those other options and give the residents a say.
How many other options are you kind of anticipating coming forwards, and who is it that's going to kind of decide what those options are?
Well, I think they've been spoken about amongst council leaders at the moment. As I said in my remarks, there's the Gedling, Rushcliffe and Newark option, which would keep the rural parts of the county together and keep service demand levels equal, and you're focused on rural connectivity and different matters that you would be focused on in an urban city. So that definitely needs to go to a full business case. We're told at the moment by those unelected officials that I keep banging on about, we're told that it wouldn't stack up because of council tax income against service delivery cost. That's somebody's opinion. Let's go and do the work. Let's go and do the work, and let's see those stats. 60-odd thousand pounds been spent on doing that. We now need to go to a full business case, and that's what I'm calling out today. There could be another option, which includes the city expanding into urban parts of the county, like Beeston and Arnold, for example. Again, that let's go to a business case on that. Let's see that, and let's give the people of Nottinghamshire a say on that, because it is not fair. If you live in Broxtowe, you are faced with two options on the consultation that Councillor Saddington mentioned earlier, and those two options are city and city. And then you will pay more on both of those options for less services. And that's the same for every resident right across the county. Under 1B and 1E, whatever the outcome is, you will end up paying more council tax and get less services. And that is not good enough. We need to draw new options up. And there are some getting dusty in desks that we need to come to the forefront and be publicised and do the business case. And that's what I'm calling for today.
And the importance is that 73% of our demand from adults and young people comes from Ashfield and Mansfield and parts of Bassetlaw. And that is paid for by the good residents of Gedling, Rushcliffe, Newark and Sherwood. And so as a result, if you remove some of those individuals paying, that reduces our revenue budget and means that we have got to look at altering the services in the Ashfield and Mansfield area where our highest demand is. And that will create, we're talking about, let's not make a failure as far as the LGR process is concerned. If we get it wrong, the residents of Ashfield and Mansfield that we're looking after, our vulnerable people, will suffer.
And that's the point about services. Yes, the actual services need to be financially sustainable, but also we need to look at not just finances, but also the residents and the services that they receive. And that's why, from a Rushcliffe point of view, if the city was involved in taking part or all of Rushcliffe, then the service delivery would diminish. It would have to, because things like libraries and leisure centres would have to close, as they have already done in the city council area, in order to pay off their debts. So there would be no option. So the service to the residents would suffer. And obviously, I wear two hats. I'm both county councillor and I'm the leader of Rushcliffe. And obviously, I can't let the services to our residents in Rushcliffe be diminished by having to pay off other councils' debts. So it's important that we keep those services as they are enjoyed at the moment.
And not only would, on your point, not only would their libraries close and their leisure centres close, they'll also pay more council tax as a result.
And our officers are well aware of this, but are continuing to go down the route of 1B and 1D. So 1E, sorry. So they are, and they're well aware of it. It's them that are turning around to me and saying 73% of the demand comes from Mansfield and Ashfield. So they know that.
The city council, the city might argue that that those changes might actually help, and that those services wouldn't close and that libraries wouldn't close. There's no definite that if Rushcliffe went into the city, for example, that you would see services completely diminished. Obviously things would change, and we know the financial position of the city council, but I think that they might argue that there may be benefits for the city.
So all you'll need to do is look at track record, because the city council is on record because of their financial woes. They've already had to close libraries and close leisure centres. So in order to pay off their debts, I think anybody is going to be living in cloud cuckoo land if they think that the residents or the services that Rushcliffe receive wouldn't be diminished. They have to be. And it's interesting, as the point that Councillor Smith made at the beginning, that the City Council are claiming that within a couple of years they think that their finances are going to be rectified again. I'm not convinced of that myself, but that's what they are claiming. So therefore, in theory, if that claim is true, then they will be able to stand on their own feet anyway, and they wouldn't need to have to expand into Rushcliffe.
Councillor Bestwick's done a lot of work on the figures, but I think the city debt is at around £760 million, is that right? Which equates to about £2,400 per person in the city. If you compare that to the existing county, which is at £561 per person, so even when if they expanded their boundaries over two districts to pay off that substantial debt, services would close, libraries would go, and rural bus services, etc., leisure centres, as was said, and all the greenery right across those lovely rural areas of Rushcliffe or Gedling and Broxtowe would be concreted over to increase tax base to pay for that, and that the residents of Nottinghamshire, over 20,000 of them that have signed the petition, have said that's exactly what they don't want. And there are other options that are getting dusty in desks, as I've said, that will allow the city to expand slightly or retain its existing boundary, because we're told in 2 years it's going to be financially sustainable, whilst protecting those services that residents in Rushcliffe, Gedling and Newark and Broxtowe enjoy at the moment.
You see there, I think at the Gedling
Stuart's got.
the Gedling meeting last Wednesday, I thought Michael Payne raised a very good point, offered a slightly different perspective on it, and I suppose some people would agree. I suppose, what's your thought with it, with the not wanting to merge with the city really? Obviously a lot of Gedling and a lot of Rushcliffe as well, and a lot of Broxtowe, they will work and use the city's services. So while they do, whether it's paying onto the tram or whatever, they do contribute in some way, but they don't pay any council tax to the council that is providing those services. So that is an argument of maybe looking a bit more fairer on the city council, and I suppose some people can see that point of view. What is your stance on that? Because at the moment it does appear no city expansion is wanted, but that's a bit of a fairer view towards it.
I think it goes both ways. You know, people travel to work, don't they? I represent Newark, and a lot of people travel to London on a Monday and come back on a Thursday and still pay council tax in Newark. But whilst you're in those areas, you're spending money in the economy. So if you live in Nottingham City, just over this bridge where we are now, you come to West Bridgeford, you spend money in the West Bridgeford shops, and you travel on the transport, whether that's provided by the county or the city, and you're paying into those services. And that will continue. These boundaries don't exist in real life, do they? You know, you can cross over them. But what we must protect within the boundaries of the county is what residents enjoy right now, which is low tax compared to the city and better services. And that's what we must protect for the residents of Nottinghamshire within the existing
Can I
boundary.
just expand upon that?
Yeah.
It was a fair point, but this debt of over £750 million hasn't happened overnight. Labour have been running Nottingham City for about 20 years. And in that time, as I know to my own cost, they've introduced things like the Working Parkee Levy scheme, which has taxed businesses to have a business in the city. Rates have gone up, parking fees have gone up. All of those things have stopped people accessing the city and using the facilities there and using the businesses there. If they'd have had a stronger business plan for their city over the past 20 years, then more people have been using it. They would have had more businesses in the city that have been able to have more tax revenue, and then they wouldn't have been in the position that they are now. But they've taxed their way into the position they're in, and they should have been taking a different path, like other cities, for example Leeds, who've been very successful.
And I think to give credit to the City Council leader, to be fair to her, she's introduced a relatively new policy that restricts new housing developments to be non-student accommodation. We would say that's too little too late, because those people moving into those accommodations don't pay council tax to the rate other households do. So it's the Stuart's council is absolutely right. Most of it is self-inflicted, and they need to get out of that, and they claim they're going to get out of it within 2 years. So let's see.
And I've got a couple of short points on. One is you have to recognise that the council tax isn't 100% of their income. So 50% of their income comes from the centre anyway, which is everybody paying their, you know, and their VAT and their income tax. So that's extremely important to the process. And we are not anti-city. I make that point. You know, we're meeting with Nagat. We want to talk with Nagat. We want to engage with her to ensure that we get this right.
Yeah.
That's the important thing. It's not about. This is not about politics. This is about getting the process right
For the residents. Yeah. Any more?
Yes, can I ask, what would be the, do you think the financial implications of drawing up all of these additional plans and getting them in business cases, and does that balance out as being kind of a worthwhile investment?
So my understanding at this point is councils are being asked to endorse either 1B or 1E to which they would like the business case to be worked further on, and they're being asked for a contribution of around £50,000. Each council is being asked to do that. What we're saying today is that you don't have to allocate, so that money is already ready to be allocated and is earmarked for allocation. What I'm saying today and we're saying today is you don't have to spend that money on 1B or 1E. Let's divert that funding into progressing other options into business cases. Definitely invest in the Rushcliffe, Gedling and Newark option, as that is the only option that will keep Broxtowe out of the city and give Broxtowe residents a say in that. And the city urban expansion into areas such as Beeston. The funding that the City Council is being asked to put into 1B and 1E could fund that option, and the funding all the other councils are being asked to invest in 1B and 1E can be diverted into the rural Rushcliffe, Gedling, Newark option. I don't know if you have anything to add, Neil?
I don't think so, really. I suppose the only real thing is that we've got to make sure that we do keep the residents in our minds, and we've got to make sure, as the government has made clear, that any options that are put forward has to be sustainable for the whole area, which is why we need to make sure we do these business cases. I mean, if it does come down to a 1B, 1E option, then obviously we've got to be considering those. But I think that the residents would criticise us if we just said, oh, well, it's just 1B and 1 or 1E. I think the residents would say, well, hang on a minute, haven't you looked at any other options? Haven't you looked at anything else? Why are you so blinkered in just looking at these? So we need to provide evidence and proof in the public engagement that we are looking at other options as well, and let's properly look at those business cases to be sure that we are putting forward what we believe will be the best options in the interest of the whole of the, when I say Nottinghamshire, I mean geographic Nottinghamshire, the whole of Nottinghamshire.
So investing a few £100,000 now could save millions in the future.
Could I just ask, so how many options do you think that the public should be able to choose from in the consultation? Obviously there are two. Are you suggesting that there be several more, or are you suggesting that at least one of them or both are taken off the table and replaced with other options? How many are you expecting the public to have to consider?
We've spoken about 4 potentially today, which is 1E and 1B, plus the Gedling Rushcliffe Newark option, plus the city expanding slightly into urban areas like Beeston. But the point is, the leaders across Nottinghamshire, myself and Neil and Councillor Clark included, got to 1E and 1B on the basis of having all options on the table against the criteria that was the criteria in January. That same discussion of everything on the table against the new criteria has not taken place, because bureaucrats don't want it to take place, because it will involve a lot more work between now and November to present them to the people of Nottinghamshire. So we are being forced, councils right across the country are being forced to pick from 1B and 1E across the county against the old criteria. We need to have the same discussion we had in January as council leaders again now, to say this is the new criteria, what options does that bring forward, and then we can all put them on the table, do the business cases, the ones that match up financially to be sustainable for the taxpayer and protect services and keep council tax low. They're the options that need to go to consultation, and our view is that should include Rushcliffe, Gedling and Newark as an option.
And
guys,
as quickly as possible.
you haven't got to go very far. You just go to Northamptonshire and see what unelected commissioners have proposed 2 unitary authorities which have been put in place, and one of those unitary authorities is failing, and that's what happens if you do the job incorrectly.
And I was going to reiterate really that the sooner this is done, the better, because of the people out there who are already starting to fill the consultation in, because it's going to skew the results, because they are not aware that there could be other possibilities.
And just on that point as well about doing it quickly, this is consuming an awful lot of time and effort, mainly with officers, but also with councillors as well. It's quite exhausting. But particularly with officers, they are having to use, and a large proportion of officers at several levels are having to do a lot of background detailed work, and that is consuming a large proportion of their time, which should really be spent delivering services to the residents. Therefore, the longer this goes on, the more it's going to cost everybody in officer time and effort. And so therefore, the sooner these business cases are looked at and drawn up and finalised and the decision made, the better, so that the officers can return to delivering the services to the residents.
In terms of then progressing with this, do you have the support of the leadership and the other members at the county council in, progressing forward with these different plans?
That's what today's all about. So I took the view that these other options against the new criteria are gathering dust in desks of officers across Nottinghamshire on the basis that 1B and 1E are ready, let's just go down that route. And we're calling that out today to say, no, that's not good enough. Let's get politicians back round the table telling officers that we need to do work on the business cases of other options. So hopefully today is the catalyst of making that happen and starting that conversation. But it's got to be quick. We've only got till November. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.